Tell me when there, Chief. Ready, set, go. Welcome everyone to the Special Council Meeting 29-20 public hearing for the City of Port Colborne. I will officially call this meeting to order. To confirm the agenda, I'll have Councillor Bodner and Councillor Wells move that. Any questions with regards to the agenda of the first meeting? Nothing. All those in favor, please raise their hand. That's carried. Disclosures of interest. I have one disclosure of interest this evening on the first meeting. Is Councillor Beauregard has declared a conflict of interest on Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report number 2020-164, subject public meeting report for zoning bylaw amendment D14-05-20 Neon Oil Inc. Any other conflicts? Seeing none. So we're now moving on to our first hearing under the Planning Act. This is for application for zoning bylaw amendment, Planning and Development Department, Planning Division Report number 2020-164, subject public meeting report for zoning bylaw amendment D14-05-20, Neon Oil Inc. Mr. Schultz, take it over.
Thank you. Good evening, members of council and Mr. Mayor, city staff, and anyone tuning in at home. The purpose of this meeting is pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to consider an application submitted by the agent, Niagara Planning Group, on behalf of the owner, Neon Oil Inc., for the lands legally known as part of lots 16, 17, 18, and 19, part of the road allowance between lots 16 and 17, part of the road allowance between lots 18 and 19 in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara. The property is municipally known as the Neon Oil lands, generally south of the CN rail line, west of Highway 140, and east of Canal Road in the City of Port Colborne. The application for zoning bylaw amendment proposes to alter the provisions of the HI 46-H zone to remove wording that requires the applicant to enter into a site plan agreement and obtain approval for private servicing prior to the removal of the holding provision on the property. The zoning bylaw amendment is being sought to allow the development process to continue with the site plan agreement and private servicing being required after the H has been removed from the property. Notice of the public meeting was administered in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act as amended and Section 5 of Ontario Regulation 545-06. Notice of the public meeting was mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the property on October 13th. A sign was posted on the property on October 13th as well, and notice was also posted on the city's website and social media. As of the date of this meeting, staff has received the comments from the following. Bonnie Fawkins from 13 Crescent Drive in Welland, Ontario submitted comments. Those comments have been circulated to council, and staff will provide a response to those questions in their recommendation report when it is ready. As well as Wendy Bover. Wendy did not provide an address to us, but I believe she is also from Welland, Ontario. And then the following agency has provided comment from the Regional Municipality of Niagara. The region states that this proposed amendment is technical in nature and requested to allow the development approvals process to continue in a manner that will allow implementation of the recommendations of the required technical studies. The technical studies will be reviewed and implemented through the site plan control process. The entire City of Port Colborne is subject to site plan control pursuant to the city's official plan and site plan control bylaw. Therefore, the holding provision duplicates this requirement. Further, the site plan agreement cannot be registered until the zoning is in place, including the removal of any holding provisions. Therefore, the region supports the proposed technical amendment and will address the review of the required technical studies and private servicing through the site plan control process. In conclusion, regional staff has no objection to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment from a provincial and regional perspective, subject to the requirements being addressed to the region's satisfaction through the future site plan application. The proposal is consistent with the PPS and conforms to the provincial plans and regional official plan. The procedure to be followed this evening will be to present Department of Planning and Development Report 2020-164, hear any comments from the applicant, receive questions of clarification from council to the applicant or planning staff, open the meeting to the public for comments and questions, announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of passage of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and provide a brief explanation of future meetings regarding this application. At this time, I would like to present Planning and Development Public Hearing Report 2020-164. The property is located south of the CN rail lines, west of Highway 140, east of the Welland Canal, and north of Forks Road. The property is currently vacant. The surrounding lands are industrial in nature, however, most remain undeveloped. Next slide, Charlotte, please. The City of Port Colborne official plan designates the property as rural employment. Land uses in the rural employment designations shall include, but not be limited to, uses that are dry industrial in nature and that they are considered to have minimum water and wastewater requirements and should be serviced through sustainable private servicing only. All new and expanding rural development shall demonstrate that the use cannot be located within the urban area due to the land use compatibility issues and/or specific locational requirements, including proximity to key transportation infrastructure, or the proposed use is related to the management or use of a resource and required to be in close proximity to it. Uses shall be compatible with the adjacent agricultural uses, planned agricultural uses, and shall not negatively impact normal farm operations. The use of the property under the official plan is not proposed to be changed since the OMB decision in 2013 that allowed the use on the property. The City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575-3018 zones the property as HI 46H, and the provisions of the zone are provided here on this map here, and also I'll give a brief summary of them. So, notwithstanding the heavy industrial zone, the following shall apply. The provisions of Section 23 Heavy Industrial of the City of Port Colborne former zoning bylaw 1150-9781 will continue to apply to the land zoned HI 46H, which is the heavy industrial with the holding provision. The permitted uses will be restricted to a 56-tank petrochemical storage facility. This holding provision under this zoning has a number of requirements that the applicant must go through prior to the removal of the holding provision. A lot of those are completing studies that include Phase 2 archaeological studies, geotechnical studies, a noise study, air quality study, site access and traffic study, a vibration study, tree preservation plan, an environmental impact statement, risk assessment report, and I believe there are a few more, but those are the ones that are covered in the zoning. So prior to the holding provision being removed, those studies had to be completed, or will have to be completed still by the applicant. They're currently in the review process with the city's peer reviewers and solicitors. The specific 2 points under the zoning bylaw is proposing to change the HI 46H zone by removing the following clauses. Under B1, the owner enters into and registers on title a site plan agreement with the City of Port Colborne, which will include recommendations made in the supporting technical studies conducted in association with the development application. And B3, prior to the city entering into the site plan agreement, approval shall be obtained from the applicable approval authority, which identifies an appropriate location and design for a private sewage disposal system and private water supply system to adequately and appropriately service the proposed use. Removing these 2 clauses from the zoning provisions will allow for the orderly development of the site through the standard City of Port Colborne process. At this time, Your Worship, I would like to invite the applicant to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. You want to introduce the applicant?
The applicant here, I believe, is Mary Lou Tanner from Niagara Planning Group.
Thank you, Mayor Steele. And I do have a brief presentation which the clerk will be assisting me with. So as the presentation comes up, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mary Lou Tanner. I am the principal planner and partner with Niagara Planning Group. Joining us this evening from Nyon are Mr. Gordon Baker, who is the president of Nyon, as well as Scott Lemke, who is solicitor for Nyon. I'll be doing the presentation, or if there are specific questions for either Mr. Baker or Mr. Lemke, they'd be more than happy to answer those questions. So we appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective on this rezoning application and appreciate Mr. Schultz's overview, which I won't repeat. But what I do want to focus on is the reasons that we have submitted this application, where we're at, and where we're going. So let me begin with the subject lands, which Mr. Schultz had shown you on a map. And they are located on, here they are, just west of Highway 140, east of the canal lands and south of the tracks. Those of you who have been involved with NION and the NION project for a number of years will know that there are other lands that are considered to be part of the NION lands. I want to reiterate that it is only the lands shown on this slide, the heavy industrial slide, that are the lands that are part of the rezoning. If we could move to the next slide, please. So the zoning, I want to give you our commitments on this particular zoning and implementing this zoning bylaw. The first in Clause A is the commitment to the land use, and that is the 56-tank petrochemical storage facility. And as Mr. Schultz indicated, we are not proposing any changes to that. In fact, NION is not asking for any special treatment, but what we are finding is that we're in a circumstance where the zoning as initially contemplated, we actually are not able to implement, but have found a more fulsome and robust process that I'll describe to you momentarily. Mr. Schultz has also walked you through the studies that are required in the holding provision in Clause B. I want to let you know that we have been working since the Ontario Municipal Board hearing on those studies. They have all been submitted to the City of Port Colborne. The city has engaged a peer review team to provide the city advice and recommendations on those studies. So that is acting in the city's interest to ensure that you are satisfied with the studies, their breadth, the technical completeness of them, and that the recommendations are appropriate for the development. What Clause B does is place a holding symbol on, and if we can go to the next slide, you'll see the 4 requirements that are part of the zoning. And I want to spend a bit of time on clause number Roman numeral 1 because it's one of the 2 that we are requesting to be removed as part of our technical rezoning. When this zoning was approved by the Ontario Municipal Board in 2013, the zoning was written to marry the zoning and the site plan, and that the studies would come as part of the site plan agreement. What we are finding and what our experience has been is that in order to design the site appropriately, taking into account all the factors, all the recommendations, and all the technical review in those studies, we needed to do the studies first. So we have now embarked on a process with the city where the zoning is in place. We have spent a number of years doing the technical studies, ensuring we have the appropriate scope, breadth, and technical requirements, and submitting them for peer review. As we come to a conclusion and respond to the city's peer review, we will end up with a series of technical studies that then will be the basis of how we design this site. This is a complex site. These issues are highly complex. The environmental impact study is important and necessary, but it drives how the site is serviced. The geotechnical is important for how the site is serviced. The site access and traffic study ties in with location on the site and the environmental pieces. I hope you can see that all of these things really are interdependent. And so getting the studies done prior to the site plan agreement was critical for us in designing the site. And as the regional comments noted, we actually can't register the site plan agreement as long as the H is still on the site. But removing clause number 1 will allow us to move forward in a way that we have embarked on with the city to design the site based on the studies. Similarly with Roman numeral 3, we actually can't implement this. The city's processes for site plan and the region's process for permitting are such that we cannot obtain approval prior to entering into the site plan agreement. We've spoken with Niagara Region and you heard their comments this evening. The region has been an integral partner to our approach in this rezoning and has supported our request to remove clause 3. Make no mistake, we're committed to an appropriate private servicing system and a permitting process. We just need to change the sequencing. So removing clause 3 assists that with that. What this leaves us with is Roman numeral 2 and Roman numeral 4. The technical studies, as I've mentioned, are submitted to the city, and we are working through the peer review process. The H can only be removed when the city is satisfied. And that's an important consideration for when we apply for the H removal, which will be at a future point in time. Similarly, Clause 4, the species at risk requirements are such that it is to the satisfaction of the province. And we have filed that information, and that actually has been completed recently. You can move to the next slide. So just to summarize, our technical amendment is to remove 2 of the clauses related to removal of the holding provision. And as I've explained, we've embarked on a more robust technical process to ensure that we are sequencing things correctly with the studies so that they get implemented in the site plan and site plan agreement. And the servicing will be part of the site plan agreement. We just can't obtain prior approval for it prior to the site plan agreement. And if you could move to the last slide, please. So in summary, I want to request that this zoning bylaw be approved. And I believe it's appropriate for the city to approve because it supports the implementation of the zoning and the studies for this site, but in a more robust and fulsome process and a different sequencing approach. The public interest is protected as the city retains decision-making on 2 important matters for assuring the public that the development will proceed as has been outlined in the zoning and all the work that's gone on to date. First, at a future point, council will need to remove the holding provision. And second, the city will need to enter into a site plan and a site plan agreement with NION. And we are committed to both of these, and no development can occur until both of these are done. And more specifically, the site plan agreement is registered on title. We cannot obtain permits for any of the work until that agreement is registered on title. Our proposed approach and the sequencing of the studies and the site plan ensures the development is implemented. And as Mr. Schultz said, uses processes that are known and are routinely used in the city of Port Colborne, as well as in Niagara region, and implements the studies that have been contemplated. And finally, just to pick up on what my regional colleagues have said, our proposal is required to be consistent with the provincial policy statement and conform to a place to grow, both of which contemplate rural employment. The Niagara Regional Official Plan also has a section on rural employment and specifically deals with this area of Port Colborne, contemplating this use and this development. And finally, as Mr. Schultz indicated, the proposal conforms to the City of Port Colborne Official Plan. Mayor Steele, I'm very thankful for your time and your courtesies, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Great, thank you very much. So I'll go to councillors at this time. Councillors online, any questions to either staff or the applicant? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bruno.
Yes, Your Worship. I put my hand up reluctantly until you said or our staff. So through you to the staff side. Mr. Schultz, is there any role in this process for our legal counsel? We're dealing with a planning document here, a public meeting under the Planning Act, and a lot of planning principles. Have we engaged our legal firm to look at this, or is there a role for them in this stage of the process? Thank you.
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, from what I understand, our legal staff has been engaged in the process since the start of this whole this approval, and they are reviewing the peer reviewers' findings to ensure that they're up to the city's standard and are looking after the best interest of the city.
Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, David. So in that peer review process, do you know where we're at in our, is legal looking at that on a ad hoc basis or when the totality of that is completed?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, they have been submitting them as they've been completed. So it has been an ongoing process. I know some of them have been completed from my knowledge, but some are still yet to be finalized with the peer review.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Counsel. Or Counselor. I'll start on my right. Counselor Wells, any questions? Counselor Clayle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to David. Can I just, so far to date, there's been nothing that legal has had any concerns about?
Mr. Schultz?
Not at the moment. I know they're going to be more involved with the holding provision removal, just to make sure that the city is covered with what we're moving forward with. But at this time, they haven't really had any major concerns, I'd say.
Thank you.
Counselor, you're set? Counselor Bodnar?
No, I think Councillor Bruno asked what I was going to ask. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So now we have oral presentations and or questions from the public.
Can I jump in first?
Oh, certainly, yes.
Before opening the meeting to the public, I would like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne Council to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. Further, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submission to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on a proposed zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there is reasonable grounds to do so. To any interested members of the public, if you would like to receive any future notices regarding this application, please contact me by email at planner@portcolborne.ca, or you can phone me at 905-835-2901, extension 202, or you can email the city clerk at cityclerk@portcolborne.ca. I will pass it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Mr. Schultz. So this time we have one member of the public, Ms. Bonnie Folkens, who lives at 13 Crescent Drive in Welland. Welcome, Ms. Folkens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council, and Mr. Mayor for allowing me to speak tonight. I do have some questions, and I understand that this public meeting is to allow the developer to move forward with the site plan agreement by removing the hold provision, but it has been 7 years since this has come into the public, so I would like an opportunity to get more familiar. You have a list of my questions. Perhaps a lot of them can be answered on an offside conversation with maybe one of the planners. But on the list of questions, there is one item that I'm concerned about, and the amount of reports that you will be getting from the developer. Does it also include a blast radius report? And if it does, would it be available to the public and to members of council?
I'll start with that question first. Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Folkens. I don't know if that has been submitted as part of this process, but we will come back to that in our recommendation report and provide an answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Folkens?
Okay, thank you. And the anticipated start date of the operations, would you happen to know that at the time?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not an exact timeline. I know they're looking to remove the holding provision in the near future, but that won't give a specific timeline for when they're looking to break ground on this.
Okay, thank you. And I know this is off topic with this, but can I ask what the mode of transportation is, whether it's rail, road, or water, or any combination of both?
Mr. Schultz?
I believe it's going to be a mixture of rail, water, and transport, but we can confirm that in our recommendation report when it comes back to council for sure.
Okay.
Ms. Folkens?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, what are the thoughts of the St. Lawrence Seaway and Transport Canada?
Mr. Schultz? Mr. Schultz?
So they will be heavily involved in the site plan process. They don't really have any issues at this time because it's just a technical amendment. They will be more involved further in the process when the holding provision is removed and they can implement their requirements through the site plan process.
Okay, Ms. Fogans?
Okay, thank you. And again, through you, Mr. Mayor, will the shore bank along the Winnick Canal be modified to suit the transportation of these goods?
Mr. Schultz?
I don't have an answer for that right now. We can come back to that in the recommendation report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fogans?
Okay, thank you. And to members of council who have my notes, 7, B, and C are not applicable because the notices were posted by October the 14th. But I will ask, is it part of the Planning Act that neighboring municipalities also get a notice in that time, or is that just a courtesy?
Mr. Schultz?
So to my knowledge, the 120 meter mail out and those notices have to go out at a certain time. And then any other notices, it's not a courtesy, but it's more of a, it has to be done, but it was done in a certain timeline. It doesn't have to be done at the 20-day period. Sorry, that was, yeah.
Okay, Ms. Fogans?
Okay, because I believe the city of Welland received it on October the 20th, so it was a little short notice. But I appreciate you giving me the time to speak tonight and ask the questions, and I will be contacting you probably in the future for updates on it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And as noted, we had one written submission from a Wendy Bover. There was no address on that one. Next, David.
That's all the public input so far tonight, and let's finish. Okay. If you would like to be notified of the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, you must make written requests to the clerk. Only those persons and public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of the adoption and passing of the zoning bylaw amendment will be given notice. This concludes the public hearing under the Planning Act. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment will return to council at a later date for a recommendation and decision.
Great, thank you, Mr. Schultz. So at this time, if I can have Councillor Clayliff and Councillor Desmarais to move our recommendation that Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report 2020-164 be received for information. Any questions on that? Seeing none, please raise your hand. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. On to our next hearing, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report number 202-161, subject public meeting and recommendation report for zoning bylaw amendment D14-05-19, 5718 Highway 3. Mr. Schultz, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and hello again to everyone here and anyone tuning in at home. The purpose of this meeting is pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to consider an application submitted by the agent Mark Cable on behalf of the owner Patricia Kenworthy for the lands legally known as part of Lot 2, Concession 2, formerly in the Township of Humberstone, now in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, municipally known as 5718 Highway 3 East. The application for zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning from agricultural to agricultural purposes only and AR 55. The zoning bylaw amendment is being sought to satisfy a condition of a farm consolidation severance under consent application B26-19-PC. Notice of the public meeting was administered in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act as amended and Section 5 of Ontario Regulation 545/06. The notice of public meeting was mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the property on October 13th. A sign was posted on the property by October 13th as well. Notice was also posted on the city's website and social media. As of the date of this meeting, staff has not received any written comments from members of the public. However, the following agency has provided comments. The Regional Municipality of Niagara, in accordance with Section 3.3.4 of the Memorandum of Understanding, the planning function and services in Niagara between the region and local municipalities, Zoning bylaw amendments for applications for agricultural purposes only required as a condition of consent are exempt from regional review. The noted zoning bylaw amendment was required as a condition of consent application B26-19-PC. Therefore, this file is exempt from our review. They did provide some additional comments just to assist staff. One comment they did have with the consent application was regarding the private septic system on the property. Their issue was that the septic system was too close to the proposed property line during the consent application, so that property line had to be bumped out, I believe, a meter. So their concerns have been resolved. The procedure to be followed this evening will be to present Department of Planning and Development Report 2020-161, hear any comments from the applicant, receive questions of clarification from council to the applicant or planning staff, open the meeting to the public for comments and questions, announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of passage and of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and provide a recommendation to council. At this time, I would like to present Planning and Development Public Hearing Report 2020-161. Could you go to the next slide, please, Charlotte? Thank you. The property is located at 5718 Highway 3 East, which is on the north side of Highway 3 to the west of Holloway Bay Road. The property currently has a single detached dwelling with several farm buildings, and most of the land is under cultivation. The surrounding lands are agricultural in nature, with the exception of residential dwellings also located on those properties. Next slide, please. The City of Port Colborne official plan designates the property as agricultural. Lands designated agriculture and prime agricultural areas as defined by the provincial policy statement and as identified on the agricultural land-based map of the regional municipality, regional policy plan, and are used primarily for agricultural purposes. A small portion of the property is also designated as an environmental conservation area, which will remain on the property. The City of Port Colborne zoning bylaws 6575/3018 zones the property agricultural, which permits the following uses: accessory agricultural activities, agricultural uses, agritourism and value-added uses, conservation uses, dwellings detached existing at the date of the passing of this bylaw and as a principal use on a new lot, dwelling detached as a principal use on an existing lot of record, kennels, cannabis production facilities, and uses, structures, and buildings accessory thereto. A small portion of the property also contains the environmental conservation overlay, which will remain on the property. The application for zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning from agricultural purposes only. To change the zoning from agriculture to agricultural purposes only and AR 55. Agricultural purposes only permits agricultural uses, conservation uses, and uses, structures, and buildings accessory thereto, including greenhouses. The AR 55 zone, which is a special provision of the agricultural residential zone, permits dwellings detached and uses, structures, and buildings accessory thereto. The special provision is being sought to recognize the increase in accessory building lot coverage on the property. Overall planning, the planning department doesn't have any issues with this proposed zoning bylaw amendment and recommend the approval. However, I will invite the applicant to provide any comments or clarification to council at this time.
Great, thank you, Mr. Schultz. So at this time we have Mr. Mark Cable, who's representing the current owner, Patricia Kenworthy. Mr. Cable, did you have any comments? If you want to, oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you now, Mark. Thank you.
I just can't, can you see me? Because I can't really see too much here.
No, we just have your name up.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, you still there?
I'm still here.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I just said good evening, Mr. Mayor, and glad to answer any questions. We've been farming this property for probably 15 to 20 years now, renting it from the landowner, and she's willing to sell the land off to us now, and we just want to continue to keep farming it as we have been. No changes, nothing to the land.
Okay, perfect. I'll ask councillors, do any councillors in the chamber have any questions? Seeing none, any councillors online have any questions? Councillor Danch.
Sorry, sitting here listening in. Mark, it was Mark, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So they mentioned greenhouses. No plans for greenhouses down the road?
That's not my farming. No desire at all for that.
And what do you grow there?
I'm a cash cropper, so I've been growing hay, soybeans, corn, wheat, clover for the last like 15 years plus.
That's wonderful. My son-in-law is a full-time farmer in the Holland Marsh, so no, that's appreciated. Thank you.
Good.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any further questions to the applicant? Seeing none, Mark, we appreciate you coming on this evening. That's all the questions for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions to planning staff? Nothing in here. Any questions to planning staff for those online? Seeing none? Go ahead.
Okay, before opening this meeting to the public, if there are any, I would like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne Council to the local planning appeal tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there is reasonable grounds to do so. To any interested members of the public, if you would like to receive any future notices regarding this application, please contact me by email at planner@portcolborne.ca or by phone at 905-835-2900, extension 202, or the city clerk at cityclerk@portcolborne.ca.
Great, thank you, Mr. Schultz. And Madam Deputy Clerk, there was no one online for questions? Okay, thank you. The announcement?
Final announcement. If you wish to be notified of the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons and public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of the adoption and passing of a zoning bylaw amendment will be given notice. This concludes the public hearing under the Planning Act. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment and recommendation report has been placed on the agenda to follow this public meeting.
Great, thank you, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you.
And this portion of our meeting is now adjourned. We will now move on to special meeting of Council 30-20. I'll call this meeting to order. Introduction of addendum items. Madam Clerk.
There are none this evening.
Thank you. Confirmation of agenda. I have Councillor Bagu and Councillor Beauregard to move that. Any questions with regards to the agenda? Seeing none, please raise your hand. All those in favor? That's carried. Disclosure of interest on this portion of the meeting. Any disclosures of interest? Thank you, Council. No one has brought up any items for a separate discussion. Last call. Anyone want to bring forward any items? Thank you. I have a mover, Councillor Bruno and Councillor Danch, for approval of all those items not requiring separate discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, Council. Consideration of bylaws. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. There are 4 bylaws this evening. Bylaw 6830-80-20 to 6833-83-20.
Thank you. I have Councillors Clayliff and Councillor Desmarais to move that. Any questions on any of the bylaws? Seeing none, please raise your hand. All in favor? That's carried. I now adjourn this meeting. Thank you, members of the public, and thank you, Council and staff.